What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of the Weekend Roundup here on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, be sure to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the content going up on the channel. Another twist in the Premier League title race, if you will. Arsenal look like they have a win, end up dropping points. Liverpool look like they might drop points, get two super late goals from Darwin Nunez to beat Brentford. So they extend that lead even further. And I want to spend most of this video talking about the Arsenal side of this and defending Mikel Arteta for a minute. Seems like, depending on the day, it's either he's too cautious, too conservative, Arsenal aren't playing, they don't create anything, they're terrible to watch. And then on the other days, they're incredibly wasteful. They can't finish. The attackers aren't good enough. They need a number 9. Kai Havertz isn't cutting it, etc., etc. And I just struggle to understand how both of those things can be simultaneously true. Because if you're creating those chances, you're not being cautious. And yes, there are going to be games where they don't look good. And certainly that has happened this season. It happened to Manchester City at the peak of their powers. When you play that possession-based game and when you're the team with all the responsibility in terms of going out and playing and making things happen, you're going to be disappointing sometimes because the bar is so high and it's really difficult to play that good of a game. And yes, has Arsenal's approach changed a little bit this season? Sure. But they're still scoring goals about as well as anybody in the league. Yes, a lot of those are coming from set pieces. But why not until somebody can actually stop them from scoring from set pieces? And you look at this Villa game, and to me this is just a really good illustration of what people seem to just not want to be talking about and just want to put this all on Mikel Arteta instead. They're up 2-0. They scored the goals. They then conceded 2 goals. And then they do get a goal that correctly gets waved off for a handball, but it was one of those unfortunate handballs that there just wasn't anything you could really do about it. It's just a bad break. And then they hit the post. And then Trossard sends that shot wide at the very, very end that he easily could have scored on and probably should have. 95 to 99 times out of 100, they win that game. They did not lose because they were too cautious. And by the way, I think they've only been shut out in the Premier League once since the beginning of November. And yes, they had a bad first leg against Newcastle in the Carabao Cup. And you had the United game in the FA Cup, which, again, was not a chance creation issue. It was an execution issue. So if you want to point to the lack of execution, the lack of finishing, that is valid. That has been a theme through most of this season. And it's an even larger problem when you're missing some of your key attacking players and the injuries just keep piling up here. And it is valid for Mikel Arteta to point out the options that Liverpool brought off their bench versus the options he had on his bench in these games this weekend. It's not an excuse. You got to just keep finding ways to make it happen. But the part that's being missed in all of this is that they are allowing 0.19 more goals per game in the Premier League this season than last season. They have taken a step back defensively, which then becomes a problem when you're trying to win 1-0, 2-1, 3-2, right? They're playing these close games and they are struggling to hold on to leads or giving up kind of uncharacteristic goals. That's where they've taken the step back. But somehow this has been spun into Arteta can't take them forward, they're regressing, and I just don't buy it. Maybe they overachieved a little bit last season and were generally healthy, And now you lose Odegaard for a stretch, and you lose Saka for a stretch, and you got the other injuries kind of around those two, and it becomes really difficult to keep pace with this Liverpool team. To me, this is much more of just a bad luck, unfortunate season for Arsenal than anything else. Maybe they're not quite good enough to win a title. By definition, they are in the conversation because they almost won one last season. But there were a lot of, and I pointed this out at the time, there were a lot of little margins that went their way last season. The little breaks, winning those head-to-head games, a lot of things allowed that to happen. And those things aren't going their way this season. And so they've taken a slight step back. But to me, this is about lack of execution more than anything else. It's not like they're playing poorly in most of these games. Yeah, they've had some stinkers. Sure. Everybody does. But Mikel Arteta cannot put the ball into the net for this team. His job is to set them up in a way that creates chances and then gives them opportunities to have success and to score goals. And by and large, they're doing that. We got to look at other reasons why this is not going the way Arsenal fans want. And of course, you're thinking we can build off of last season. Now you don't have City to deal with, hypothetically, with their struggles this season. And of course, so it's disappointing and you're looking for somebody to blame because this could have been Arsenal's year. And it just looks like it's not going to happen. But on the list of reasons why, to me, Mikel Arteta is nowhere near the top of it. It's really easy to just point to the manager and say that's the problem. It's a lot harder to actually diagnose what those issues are, or to say we need to go spend a bunch of money to solve part of our problems and go get ourselves a high-level number 9 that is reliable in front of goal. It's much harder to do that kind of self-reflection than to just say, oh, let's change the manager. So I'm going to bat for Mikel Arteta here. If you want to criticize him for something, criticize him for the defensive lapses. The fact that they've taken a step back in that area. Because they're still scoring goals. When they have a 2-0 lead, they should win. And they didn't. And they still almost scored some more goals, and they still almost won. This is not an attack issue. Got to kind of reprogram and just realize that sometimes things don't go your way. And that's kind of where Arsenal are this season. Other thing I wanted to mention is what is going on in Serie A. Big game at the top of the table between Napoli and Atalanta. It is Napoli who prevail. Really fun game. Your two heroes for Napoli to get the goal that put them ahead. Scott McTominay, the ultimate game winner after they allow an equalizer from Romelu Lukaku. Those are your first and tied for second leading goal scorers on this team. Those are your two leading goal scorers who are currently members of this team after Kavica Kvaratskhelia moved to PSG. Romelu Lukaku and Scott McTominay. Now, obviously, Lukaku has had a tremendous amount of success in Serie A. The league fits him really well. It's not surprising that he is an important part of a really good team in Serie A. He has proven he can do that before. But you look at this Napoli team, and you compare it to the one that won a title a couple seasons ago. By the way, their top 4 players in terms of goal involvements are no longer at the club. Their manager is no longer at the club. And you look at that team had Kavica, and that team had Victor Osimhen. Those two guys were ridiculously good that season. And yes, of course, you're helped by the fact that Inter take a slight step back. Nobody else rises to the occasion. They kind of just waltz to the title because there was nobody to challenge them. But that was also just a really, really, really good team that nobody fully appreciated until it was happening. Because you didn't come into the season talking about Kavica Kvaratskhelia and Victor Osimhen as, two of the top attackers in Europe. And that's just what they were that season. This team doesn't have that kind of firepower. Lukaku obviously has been really good in that league. And I will defend Scott McTominay for as long as I live. Why he got jettisoned from Manchester United, I will never fully understand. To me, he was the most impressive player probably on that team, maybe outside of Diego Dallo. And he just scores big goals. Club, country, doesn't matter. And he's still doing it for Napoli. But you just look at this team, and this team, now you can look in hindsight at the previous team that won the Scudetto and go, okay, that was just a really, really good kind of once in a generation team. And the stars aligned, they had that phenomenal season, they got it done. I don't feel that way about this team. But this team is still right there at the top of Serie A. And they're coming off a really bad season, of course. So Antonio Conte comes in, and of course you're expecting a response, an improvement. This team is way better than they played last season. Antonio Conte is a really, really good manager. But the level of improvement and what they are doing is extraordinary. It really is. And the players who are doing it too. I guess let me put it this way. Who on that team, and specifically the guys who are carrying the load for this team right now, are you looking at going, he's not going to be there very long. The top teams in the world are going after him. Right? It was a ticking clock for Osimhen and for Kvaratskhelia. You knew they were not going to... It was a question of how long can they hold on to him. And Osimhen's career took a weird turn there, but Chelsea were wanting to get that deal done, right? Kvic's now at PSG. They were going to the biggest clubs in the world. Who is coming after Scott McTominay? Who at this point is coming after Romelu Lukaku? And yet, here they are, again. Now, they got to finish the job. There's still plenty of opportunity for Inter to give them a run for their money. Maybe Atalanta kind of regroups here and makes a really strong end to the season. We'll see. But they get Inter at home. They've got a little bit of a cushion. Now Inter have, game in hand. But I just want to take a second to appreciate this, because it's a very different story with different main characters than what happened in the previous Scudetto season. And it is remarkable in its own right, and maybe even more remarkable, just the context is different, because you don't have the weight of the history and how long all of these fans have waited to finally win a Scudetto, and the fact that they just kind of got to waltz to it and they had this great team. That's not what this is, but nobody came in thinking Napoli are going to win the league this season. And I feel like even if they do, you're not going to look at it going, oh, that was a all-time great team there. We just didn't appreciate it until they kind of got going. That's just not what this group is. But Antonio Conte has them playing terrific. They're getting timely goals from guys who just have a knack for doing that. And here they are again. This should be a really fun title race down the stretch. But Napoli get the big win over Atalanta, cement themselves atop of Serie A, at least for the moment. That is all for the weekend roundup. Thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you next time.